GNSS is the only source of ubiquitous positioning information that provides that standard that is available to everyone, both for positioning but also for timing.
One main technical takeaway that I got from your paper is about sensor fusion. Like, it seems like it's the only way to go at the moment, and we've seen companies taking very different approach on those, with very different sensors, and some really focusing on optical and radar, some other more with Lidar and GNSS.
I guess I've seen the same trends in the industry, that there's definitely this movement towards, sensor fusion to solve this problem of autonomy. How do you do this in all environments? How do you do this in all weather? Well, in the end of the day, all of these sensor suites have different advantages, and we work differently in different environments, and some are better than others for different things. And I think early on, there was definitely this attitude of us versus them. There was these camps of people who came from a background in, say, Lidar or vision or GNSS. And, when there's the old expression, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail, so you're trying to, and so I think initially there was definitely this sense of, sort of a battle of which one was going to win, which is the technology for autonomy. But I think the realization and conclusion that the community is coming to is that to actually achieve redundancy, to actually achieve the level of safety that is starting to be at least agreed upon, which is, commonly the one standard that's out there now is this ISO 26262. Which is this, automotive safety integrity levels that are needed. The strictest one is ASIL-D, and so this is the target that folks are sort of citing as, what are they looking for in autonomy? And I think when you start to actually, decompose the system and see how reliable the pieces are, it's very hard to do it with one technology alone. And so I think that the direction that folks have been going is this sensor fusion approach. Now, how you actually go about doing that is still a hard question. Qualitatively, Lidar works very well in these so-called feature-rich environments. So that is, if you're in a dense urban environment, you're trying to lock on to a previous map of the environment that you have made. You can think of that as a 3D structure of the environment. When you're in these urban environments, there's a lot of unique structures around you, and you can say, okay, I'm seeing a post here, a building there, this here, this there, a mailbox there. I'm definitely in this place. But when you pull those things away, the uniqueness of that solution starts to break down, and you can think of the limiting cases being on the highway where you don't have much around you. It becomes much more difficult for that system to work, and so Lidar tends to, at least the systems I've seen, tends to break down in those environments. Qualitatively, GNSS has sort of the opposite problem, where in the absence of buildings is where it works best. Whereas when you're downtown, that's when it starts to have obstructions to the sky, and it doesn't necessarily perform as well as it does in these open environments. And so in many ways, they're very complementary technologies. And another one we can't forget is, of course, the inertial technologies. That's bridging the gaps between these outages of any of these systems. But there's certainly a lot of work that's been done also in these vision systems and radar-based systems as well. Radar has the advantage that it's not as adversely affected by weather as Lidar is, for example, and as vision is. You can imagine if you're in a snowstorm, you don't see much with a camera, so it becomes harder to localize. How you do this sensor fusion, I think, is still an open question. I think that there are folks who advocate for this tightly coupled sensor fusion, where you do, at the measurement level, you combine all these things together and you get something that works, very well. I think that those who work in the kind of safety and redundancy world prefer to see independent systems that function independently and therefore don't talk to each other and don't everything rely on one thing to make something come together. I think it's at least more difficult to do that analysis right now. So and also the traditional approach that's been taken is to have as many redundant boxes as possible, but it is hard to do that. But definitely there is this movement towards sensor fusion because of the qualities that some of these different sensors bring to the table.
Coming back to your point about the role of GNSS out of all those different sensors, can you tell me what you think about the role of maps? Because there is a high dependency here.
In the context of autonomous vehicles, there's lots of different maps that are used. There's these so-called high definition maps, HD maps, which really are maps that give semantic information down to the level of the paint on the road. So that is, where are the lane lights, where are the turning lanes, where are the stop lines, down to that level of fidelity of what's going on. And there are arguments for and against these maps. There are some who think these maps are a good idea, some who think that these maps aren't a good idea. To give one perspective, and this is more towards these maps being a good idea, is that human drivers are more confident when they know where they're going and when they know what they should expect as they drive. Autonomous vehicles are the same. The more information they have, the less uncertain they are about things as they drive on the fly, and so I think that's the importance of these maps. But more than that, really, to achieve safety in autonomous decision making, maps will play a critical role, because to get true situational awareness, so for the vehicle to have really the best picture of what's going on out there, is the only way that that vehicle, in my opinion, is going to make the most informed decisions and really get a highly safe operating vehicle. You have to really know what's going on all around you. And this is not just to the level of what are the sensors around the vehicle. To really drive better than a human, the vehicle needs to know what is going on at the city level, what is coming up around the block, so that it can anticipate all those things, not react like a human would react, but anticipate these things in a way that's completely unprecedented. And to do that, vehicles need to share data. And for the vehicles to share data and for the data to be useful, the data needs to be tied to a precise location in a reference frame that everyone agrees on. So there needs to be a standard in terms of these reference frames. And not only does that, data need to be agreed on, but the integrity and security of the location information that's tied to it also needs to be standardized and agreed on. And only in that way, by sharing all that data, will you get the situational awareness you need to really, I think, make the best informed decisions that you can make on the road towards that goal of driving better than a human.
If I sum up a bit things here, do you think the main role of GNSS in autonomous vehicles would be to create this reference, to be this global reference that then is upgraded with other sensors and other information?
I think that's a really good point of view, and I would echo the same. I think that the role of GNSS in these vehicles, in addition to being one of these sources of localization to help build the safety case for these vehicles, I think GNSS is the only source of ubiquitous positioning information that provides that standard that is available to everyone, both for positioning but also for timing. Timing becomes important because these situations are going to be very dynamic, and so having that available to you is very important. And so I think that GNSS today is the only source that provides that ubiquitous solution, across, things on the scale of the entire country, the United States of North America, of the entire world. So to give an example, there are several, self-driving platforms out there today, each of which makes their own maps in order to operate. So in order to solve this problem, the approach that these sort of full stack technology companies have taken to doing these early pilot autonomous programs is to build their own maps of wherever it is that they're operating. And what seems to happen is that these maps don't share a reference, they don't share a datum. There's no platform for information sharing between them. And I think that works fine for small pilot programs, it works fine for demonstrations. But as soon as you start to scale this over something the size of a continent, you need to have an agreed upon datum for the maps to actually line up over the scale of the country, but also for this agreed upon standard to emerge. And I think that GNSS is the primary candidate for that.